Thank you for joining us again today for the podcast series of ANTOR, the Association of Tourist Boards, National Tourist Boards and Representatives. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dennis England, who is the Market Director UK and USA for Visit Denmark. And we're going to have a chat about how Denmark is getting on in the world of tourism. So Dennis, before we actually talk about Denmark, let's talk a little bit about ANTOR. And you've been on the board, you've been a very active member. Denmark's always been a very active member of ANTOR. I remember way back when setting up the sort of MICE offshoot that's now become much more important than it was at the time with Visit Denmark. What do you consider to be the main benefit of ANTOR membership?
Well, thanks, Alison, and thanks for being here. It's really nice being here. I think there's a couple of things that are very important when it comes to ANTOR. More than anything, I think it's important that we have a sort of a shared body or a shared voice within the industry. I think particularly the past sort of 18 months, 2 years have proven that that having that shared voice and being able to raise that across the industry, whether it's politicians or partners across the industry, I think has been important. I think that's one thing, and I think the other thing is, and probably also haven't been more important throughout the last 2 years, is a space where we can share ideas and have talks about everything industry related. I think we've all been sort of in a limbo and been uncertain as to where things would go, and having had ANTOR to sort of be a space where we could talk about these things, I think has been incredibly important to all of us. Yes,
and I think fraternity is one of the words that we use, which is perhaps a little old-fashioned word, but I think it's very impactful. It is very much what ANTOR offers all their members, especially when they're new to the market. And I believe ANTOR's voice has become much stronger during the last couple of years, being asked to speak on the BBC News or Sky TV or Time Radio has put ANTOR a little bit more out in the consumer forum as well as the trade forum, which is good.
Yeah.
So how is Visit Denmark structure doing? A lot of offices in the last 2 years have had to downsize. Some sadly have had to make people redundant, some have had to furlough and can't unfurlough. How's Visit Denmark structure doing over in the UK, and especially as you're covering the States from over here, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a fortunate position that from a government point of view, tourism is considered highly important for the development of Denmark. So it's an industry that's prioritized, and we haven't had to do any cut downs. We haven't had to restructure. On the contrary, we've been allocated more funds to work with tourism. So we obviously have a central organization in Copenhagen, but we continue to have market offices in our prioritized markets, where UK and the US are certainly some of them. So we have the same structure basically as we had before, but we've been fortunate enough to have more resources allocated.
Yeah, that is very fortunate. And roughly how many people are there in your office in the UK?
So in the UK we are 5,
yeah.
And it's the same structure in the US. So yeah, and we had that before as well. So there's been no changes there.
That's a relatively good number. You'd be surprised how many of our members are literally 2 people in their offices, struggling with the same budgets, but
I know.
It's manpower rather than resources thereafter. So have you worked for Visit Denmark for long? Have you been with the, for me, I've only known you as Visit Denmark, but I don't think I've known you for all that long. So have you been there for very long?
Yeah, well, it feels like it, but I think that's because the industry has gone through so many things. I've been there for 6.5 years, so I suppose reasonably long. Before I joined Visit Denmark, I've never worked sort of with a public body, and I've never worked with tourism. So it was my first. So started straight into this position in the UK. Came from Denmark. But my professional upbringing is sales and marketing, and I came with a toolbox, I think, that was relevant for Denmark and certainly the way the whole media landscape was developing and technology developing, I had something I could contribute with from other industries.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because ANTOR have always taken the heads, their CEOs have always come from outside of the travel industry, and I think it's obviously done ANTOR a world of good, and Denmark too. So what were you doing before?
So I've always worked with sort of big global brands. So I worked with Samsung, I worked with Sony PlayStation. I worked with Hasbro, so I was Action Man back in the days.
So you haven't worked, this is going to be a classic Denmark comment, so you haven't worked with Lego then?
No, but I worked in the industry, and so I obviously know Lego. I know Lego very well, both sort of from my professional history and obviously, yeah, like everyone else grew up with it. not just being Danish.
It's a great brand to be associated with, don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
And so that answers the next question as to how long you've been in the industry as well, which I was going to ask you. But what changes have you witnessed during the last 6 years? Obviously, it's been a very hectic 6 years. All sorts of things have happened with Brexit, with COVID, yeah, and more. So what would be your main points of reference for change during those 6 years?
I think there's been quite a lot, and then there's some that I'm surprised, things that hasn't really changed. I think there's the obvious ones relating to COVID, which sort of has its own story and its own life, I suppose, and where reality settles once we're through it, no one really knows. But I think before that, I think the big changes were technology, and I think and with technology, I think accessibility and opportunities. I mean, the whole world before COVID, the whole world was open to all of us, and it was accessible, and that was wonderful from a consumer point of view. But working with a destination in that competitive landscape obviously demanded new things, new skills, and probably new structures. So I think that's been a major thing, and that's here to be. I mean, where the world settles and to what extent people are willing to travel again, and when, we'll all have to see. But there's certainly something about technology that make the world more accessible.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think obviously sustainability has become a part of everyone's agenda, and it will be something that will stay on everyone's agenda. I think we're all hearing about it, we're all talking about it, we're all expecting it to be something that the consumers will demand even more. But I also think we're all, to an extent, struggling with defining what it actually means to us and how we want to sort of articulate it. And I think that's, but obviously, I mean, sustainability, yes, definitely. If there's one thing, and with sustainability, or maybe just before sustainability, obviously the whole challenge we're all facing in terms of over-tourism.
Yeah.
And what we want to do with that. And that, I think, became a theme for everyone, for us as well, and how we wanted to deal with that. And now we're in a situation where we're all crying for tourism, and we'll see what that means. But it's certainly giving us an opportunity to rethink how we want to manage it. But yeah, that's a big thing. And then, like you talked about yourself, Alison, in the beginning, there's been a lot of restructure going on with the NTOs, and I'm talking to other NTOs, and we're talking internally. So in this whole new landscape of technology and consumers moving, what's the right structure, and how do we do things? And we're having those discussions internally with Denmark, and I'm also talking with our NTOs about it. And we're all choosing different models, and I don't think we've seen the right model. But that's been on the agenda, and increasingly on the agenda. What is the right model? and in that, not just our internal structure, but what's the mandates for the NTOs. So there's a whole political discussion going on as well as to what are the tasks and the roles that the NTOs should work with moving forward. So these are things that has certainly been on the agenda more recently than they were when I started, where I think it seemed like we all had the same models and we were all doing the same. Then that's certainly changing. So
yes,
been,
and I think.
Sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, and then there's another thing that I thought we all expected to change, which is the structure of travel trade, which seems to be much more resilient than I think we might all have thought, at least when we started. And again, with technology and what technology would do with travel trade, but travel trade is still more relevant than ever, and I don't necessarily see it declining. That may change in structure as well, but the need for travel trade is probably more important now than ever. And we're all the uncertainty we have in the marketplace. I think travel trade has some interesting years ahead of it. But it's interesting because it seems to be more relevant now than ever, where we thought that technology would probably do something to that space as well.
Yes, and of course the need for regulation and the need for insurance and the need for cancellation policies. It needs to the need for the consumer to be reassured means that even if they think they're making a booking directly online, if they're using Expedia, we know they're not, or if they're using BA, we know they're not. They're booking through the travel trade. And you're right, the travel trade is very resilient. After every time you feel that the travel trade may just be becoming a dinosaur, something happens in the world and they manage to be there to save the day, which is fantastic for the industry. I think the thing with the travel trade structuring at the moment is they're going very much towards home working and independence, which is great because that's giving the consumer an even better, in theory, an even better service because they're much closer to the consumer, they know them better. And it's also fitting in with the whole carbon emission reductions of traveling to work and having office space and etc. And I think with sustainability, we've gone from ecotourism to responsible travel to sustainable travel. And basically what we've all got to do is stop emitting carbon, CO2 as quickly as possible, because if not, we won't necessarily be here in the same way, unless our children won't be, to enjoy travel. So I think it's a big, the one thing COVID's done is put that on the agenda, as you say, because I think we've all appreciated the fact that when we're not traveling, how much we miss it, but also what it does to the environment. I mean, so many people have discovered they have birds in their gardens that they didn't know they had before, which is a fantastically positive thing. And if we can all keep up with technology, wouldn't that be wonderful? Every time you turn around, there's something new that someone else has done. I saw someone showed me a video recently where there's a 3D advertisement in Piccadilly Circus where this kind of thing jumps out at you.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And you're just going, how can anyone conceive that? So yeah, every time you open something or look at something, which is exciting and it's great to be part of it. It's really great to be part of it, and especially with travel into space coming up, it's exciting, but it's also a bit disheartening, the amount of money that's being spent on that rather than on trying to sort out the carbon emissions crisis. But hey, that's just my concern. In the UK structuring, we've got the challenge where you have DMOs, and they've always been called destination marketing organizations, but they're now morphing into destination management organizations. So not just marketing and promoting, but managing the whole process. And I think that's perhaps something some of the tourism officers are having to take on board as well. You're managing the whole process, because over tourism, you have to manage everything that goes with travel. So it's very interesting times. So Denmark is slowly, like all destinations, recovering from COVID, I'm assuming. You've been very active during the whole period. I think Scandinavia has definitely put itself on the map as a region to visit, kind of regionally as well as individual countries during that period. So how's Denmark faring now?
Very well.
Good.
I think, yes. Yeah, I mean, the vaccination uptake has been very, very good. We all obviously have our rejectors as well, but not as many as, for instance, here in the UK. So I think that's good. The numbers are very low. And actually, 3 weeks ago, Denmark, the government officially declassified COVID as a critical disease. So COVID now in Denmark is classified as a level with flu. So it's not a critical disease anymore. So I think we are pretty close to being back to normal. There aren't any restrictions anymore. So that's good. Yeah. Life seems pretty normal. I was there the other day, and it was although we've left a lot of the restrictions here in the UK, it's still, COVID is obviously still around us, and it's part of our everyday, whatever we do during the everyday. But in Denmark, it's just like, yeah, it doesn't really exist anymore.
And Denmark, of course, didn't have so dramatic lockdowns, did they? You were able to move amongst Scandinavia as well. Seemed like there was more freedom of movement, and it was more open.
There were periods where it was locked down, but not at all to the extent that we had the lockdown in the UK. But there were times where the countries were closed and the shops were closed, and we were dealing with. Because of course the same issues.
Yeah. Well, it's great. I think, we all have to move forward, as you say. I had my flu jab the other day. I've been having that for years, so I'll carry on having that.
But did you have your booster jab at the same time?
No. I haven't been offered a booster jab yet, but I will have it if they give it to me. I'm very happy to have that. I just have complete confidence in the scientific world, and I have to say I feel that that's the way forward. So you've got UK, European and American visitors. How many UK visitors come to Denmark? I mean, I'm one of those terrible visitors that has loved Copenhagen and been several times, primarily in fact, always on business, to go to a trade show, or Scandinavia was under my remit in a different life, and loved coming over to the main cities. Always said to myself, I'll come back and visit, but never have managed to. And I think that sums me up with Amsterdam and Holland as well, and the Netherlands. And you've got the same problems, haven't you, really? It's getting people, and so has Great Britain, getting people out of the cities into the rural areas. So how's that going? How many visitors do you have from the UK? Or did you have in 2019? Let's put it that way.
Well, we don't measure visitors, we measure bed nights. So we have just below 1 million bed nights. So UK is the 5th largest market for Denmark. So Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Holland are bigger, but UK is the 5th biggest. It's always been a highly attractive market to us, because when Brits visit Denmark, they typically come on city breaks and short breaks, and they typically have a fairly high spend. When you're visiting Denmark, you're not going because you want a cheap holiday. You know that it won't be. So you visit Denmark for the quality experiences we have, be that gastronomy, obviously, but also just life quality, and that means that Brits tend to spend quite a lot. So they're good. And in other words, the Brits are typically good for the whole tourism product. So they stay in the hotels, they eat in the restaurants, they visit the attractions and the museums, they use the infrastructure. So we like having Brits over. And you're right. We are in the same space as Holland when it comes to getting people out of Copenhagen and into the country. It's going really well, primarily because we have good access. So out of the 4 big airports, Copenhagen obviously be the biggest one. The next 3 ones are all in Western Denmark, and they're very well connected with the UK. It's been very good. So I think 35% of British bed nights are now outside of Copenhagen. So so it's positive. Yeah,
that's good. And you, of course, you often get the badge of being the happiest people in the world. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So we come over for a little bit of extra happiness when we hopefully get that one as well.
Oh, you should be more than welcome. I think the timing for that and for Brits is probably right.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a little bit more in common than most of our Scandinavian cousins and colleagues with the Viking era, and having a little bit of similar blood somewhere if we dig deep.
Yes, it certainly feels like it. We have something in common, and you feel that. So yeah.
And then, so lastly, now looking forward and all this sort of 2040, 2030, depending what your vision is. It was 2020, but of course that's long since passed. And I don't think anyone, well, no one did. No one imagined. We all had 2020 vision plans, and then of course never imagined that we would be in a world pandemic. So it makes it difficult now, doesn't it, to plan more than a year ahead and visualize what it will be like in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. Do you have a plan for Denmark that's a long-term plan, and do you have sort of a strategy there you'd like to share?
Yes, we don't have a written plan for the next. We're trying to figure out what to do next year. Let me put it like that. So, but no, looking forward, there's a couple of things that will be very important for us. Because one thing, if there's one constant, then it is that things are constantly changing. And somehow we need to have an organization and a structure that can operate within that. So that's something we talk a lot about. And again, obviously, technology is hugely important. So I think from an organization point of view, for lack of better to say, agility will be absolutely key, because we simply don't know what the right structure will be. So that's one thing. The other thing is we do know that that tourism is prioritized and will continue to be prioritized in Denmark. And I think sustainability will obviously remain on the agenda, and it will take up more space, but it will not just be environmental sustainability, it will be social and economic sustainability as well. And that will be hugely important. And I think when we talk about the latter one, if there's an industry that can distribute, see how I put it, can distribute opportunities and create workplaces across the country, then it's tourism.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that, and in that is, and sustainability will be part of that, because it will be about distributing and having even more focus on distributing tourism across the country. One thing, but also distributing tourism across seasons. And for us, it will be understanding how we live from tourism, but also how we live with tourism. And I think that will be important for everyone. So how can we avoid over tourism, but still celebrate that tourism is also what gives Danes all the opportunities in their everyday. That's why we have so many good restaurants. That's why we have world-class museums and attractions. It is because we also have tourists. And I think that's important to understand that. And back to what I said before, that we do have an opportunity now. So although we're all crying for tourists, we also have a pretty clean slate in many respects. And we do have an opportunity to understand how we should organize it in a way that we can reap all the benefit, but still live with it in a way that Danes in their everyday can see themselves as well. I think that will be key for us.
Yeah, and the consumers looking for regenerative tourism, so that they don't leave an impact, but they actually leave a positive impact on the country.
Agreed.
So finding ways of creating products that do that throughout the country, and transformative experiences, such as becoming part, entering into a community, finding ways of really engaging with the local people is very important on people's agendas now when they travel. So that fits in quite nicely with what what you're saying. So one last question, which you might throw you a bit, but the some of the Scandinavian countries have been doing quite a lot of promoting their TV programs on British TV. Have you had any particular program that's been filmed in Denmark that's showcased the country yet?
There's certainly been some programs that has had quite an impact in the UK. So obviously the Crime and Born, and there's a new season of Born coming out next year, and we will work with that. But it's obviously very much based on Copenhagen. Yeah, it's something we understand the impact of. I don't think we haven't worked with it in the same way as, say, Ireland has worked with the film tourism. Yeah, I don't know if there's a good series that does something for us outside of Copenhagen. I think we'll take it up. We're yet to see that, but I think the impact that Born and the Crime had on us was interesting, because obviously it's Nordic noir, so it's not the happiest of seasons, but it's given us an opportunity to talk to media about what else Denmark is about. I think so in that respect, I think it's open door for us. And if not directly sort of promoted Denmark, then it's certainly giving us an opportunity to have other conversations.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you, Dennis. Thank you very much. I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add or ask me or share before we get on with our day jobs.
No, thanks, Alison. It's been really, really nice having this chat with you. I look forward to being part of ANTOR moving forward. I think the last 2 years have certainly proven that there's so much reason for us to be together and to have this shared voice in the industry, but also to create platforms where we can have conversations, because we'll all be looking into a future that will be fairly uncertain. So to have this, you call it fraternity, and we can call it that, but yeah, to have this space where we can have an open conversation with other organizations, I think is incredibly helpful.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Dennis. As ever, lovely to see you and speak to you.
Likewise, Alison. Likewise.
And
thanks.
Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
Care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.